Hello and welcome to 1 Week Only.
A podcast dedicated to international and independent cinema that deserves a closer look.
I'm Conor,
And this is Carlos.
and this is episode 149, and we're calling it Virtual Cinema because we can't go to the theaters right now. So this is our kind of report on what you can see from home, because unfortunately you can't go out to theaters right now.
Yeah, we're trapped. For me, it's been 15 days now, which is a long time. And yeah, there's still movies to be seen. Some of the ones that we'll talk about here are not available right this second.
Yeah, we had a couple films we saw that we were going to talk about. Oh, we were going to review in full, but then the theaters closed.
Yeah,
so...
and also, it's sort of like, sadly, we become more sporadic with the podcast. Mostly my fault. And so thank you for having me back on this podcast. And yeah, but these movies will eventually be available on, VOD or home release or whatnot. So it's not like they'll vanish. Some of them you cannot see right now. A lot of them you can, thanks to, this new sort of initiative.
Yeah, because right now, you might have seen some Hollywood movies are going straight to VOD, which, if you really need to see them, you can now. But unfortunately, these are films that were getting a full theatrical release, who are now basically saying, "All right, we can't, and we're going to cut it off."
Yeah, it's great that The Invisible Man and what else, Emma and
a couple
Onward, I think, the Disney film, but which is great, and if people want to see them, and the studios need that revenue. But it's also like there's plenty of movies that you could see. Like, it's just, to me, this idea that you need it all right now, it's a little strange that you have to have this new release right this second and watch it at home when there's plenty of other films.
And the worst thing is that those films, yes, the studios will get revenue, but there's no revenue for the theaters who are losing out of this. So what independent distributors have done now is create this virtual screening rooms where they have organized it with the independent theaters, and they're going to share the revenue from these streaming sites. So there are several theaters, all your local art house theaters are working with independent distributors like Kino, like Oscilloscope, like Film Movement to say, hey, let's put it online, limited time streaming, and we'll split the revenue. So if you really want to see these independent films, this is a way that supports both the distributor and the theaters.
Yeah, it's great. I just do hope that it's a temporary thing and it doesn't become sort of like a replacement in the future. I feel like once, the general public, once something is available, it sort of becomes sort of like expected, that, if you've done it for this special occasion, why can't you do it, forever now? Which is sort of the fear with the studio films, that now that they've been available, to rent, even at a higher cost, it's sort of dangerous for exhibitors, because personally, the both of us and a lot of people don't want this to be the end of movie theaters, but so I think it is great that independent distributors are helping out movie theaters. I just hope that it doesn't become the norm, because to an extent, these exhibitors, these independent theaters, are sort of taking a gamble on their nemesis, right? The idea of like having it all at home at your hands and sort of like not going to the theater. But it's great that they're getting part of the revenue, because otherwise they'll be getting nothing because they're completely closed. So it's good on the distributors, I feel, to want to share the revenues with their business partners, which are these theaters.
And if you want to help out more, you can also buy like gift cards or memberships to these theaters as well if you want to help them on beyond that. But if you want to see these films, this is the best way to support both
the
partners.
Distributor and the exhibitor, because otherwise they're not getting any
popcorn sale, any concession sales, which really sucks this point.
And the employees that I'm hoping that this also helps these theaters help their employees and whatnot, if they're getting a little bit of that revenue. So
but our first film was in theaters, but they're going to re-release it later on this year. That's First Cow, May 24. They're deciding to basically, we think this film can do better in theaters, so we're going to save it until theaters reopen.
It's a smart decision, and I feel like A24 can allow itself to do that because they've now become a brand.
Yeah, they have the strongest of all the independent brands.
Yeah, they've become sort of like a very sort of like hip and very they've managed to amass a fan base of young, film goers. There's of all ages, but I do feel like
Yeah.
oftentimes, there's sort of like very art house films or foreign language titles tend to, their audience tends to usually be, an older audience, that's always been into those films. But A24, with, their independent films that are not always accessible, but more.
They sell them very well. And
Yeah, they sell them very well,
them,
and also the films themselves are not incredibly obscure. They're
Sure.
They're sort of at the right intersection between mainstream and auteur or art house. So they know their product, they know how to sell it, so they can allow themselves to save these films first cow, and re-release it once theaters are open again, rather than put it on VOD right away. So it's a beautiful film.
Yeah, you might have, if you were in New York and LA, you had a chance to see it for like a week or two.
No, even less. I think it opened. Didn't it open?
I think New York for a week,
it
but
opened
LA
a
was
week.
only like a few days. Yeah, but if you've seen it, it's the new film with Kelly Reichardt.
It did open
really
in LA and
film.
New York for a week. Yeah, it opened March 6th. So it was in theaters for like a full week. Yeah.
But, if you like Kelly Reichardt's films like Certain Women or Wendy and Lucy, it's definitely in that same kind of, she's very restrained, these very naturalistic character dramas. And this one's great because it's about two men in 1800s Oregon who, when a cow shows up in town owned by the wealthy owner nearby, they decide, hatch a plan to use that cow to make some money for themselves. And it's a really interesting kind of buddy comedy, sort of also like crime thriller, but filtered through Kelly Reichardt's very nuanced and character driven naturalism. So
I enjoyed it. I feel like it's
fascinating.
It's a sort of like a film of small delights. There's never anything grand happening, even when the stakes are higher, because this pair gets in trouble for sort of taking advantage of a situation in order to get ahead, in this sort of at a time in America where it was very industrious and enterprise, and places were being sort of developed and cities were being built or whatnot. And one of them is a Chinese immigrant who befriends this American who's a cook or a chef, who's sort of very mild, mild mannered man, and who finds joy in making biscuits, and they realize that such a sweet small pleasure becomes priceless in this harsh environment where
they're literally bringing a part of civilization to this wilderness,
right? Through this cow, right?
Because
the cow's milk becomes sort of like the main ingredient that sort of tells people that there's change coming. It's the first cow in this town. What does that mean? But it's also owned by the wealthy guy. They're sort of like almost like being not Robin Hood, because they're still selling a product, but like trying to get something from the rich, and sort of like stick it to the man or whatnot. In a very subtle Kim
it never becomes about speeches about this. It's very much about just the process of doing it. She loves process.
That's what makes it beautiful. I do feel like I am not as in love with it as other people have. I do feel like I should rewatch it.
I think all her films actually benefit from. They're all so subtle that they would definitely all benefit from a second watch or a third watch.
Yeah. So I might later when it's possible, I might give it another view and see if I find more things that I like. I mean, it's definitely a fantastic film. I just maybe wasn't in the right space when I saw it.
Our next one is I Was at Home, But
this one's one that's hard to talk about. I'm still sort of thinking about this one. This is a new film by Angela Skanelek or Shanelek.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
And this won the Silver Bear at the Berlin Film Festival in 2019. The Golden Bear went to Synonyms.
Yep.
This one's a very cryptic sort of film that, in essence, if you could boil it down, it's about a woman who's getting over her husband's suicide, I believe, or he's dead.
He's dead. We're not sure. It's very unclear what happened.
And
she has two small kids.
And it's sort of like bringing or trying to act as things, as normal as possible, trying to go on with life, and after this tragedy. But the way that it is structured doesn't really give you any sort of a very strong idea of what the plot is, or even if there's a plot. There's a musical number in which like she's dancing with her kid. It's a beautiful moment. She's dancing with the kids at a doctor's office, and then there's also a conflict with one of the oldest of the two kids who we assume that he's been acting out in school. There was trouble in school, but we begin also with perhaps a metaphor of animals, with a donkey and what is it, a rabbit,
and like a sheepdog, right? It's a cryptic film. Like, that's all the best way I can put it, because it is like these moments that the film does not try to make a causality link between them. It simply has a scene and then another scene, another scene. You kind of have to figure out how they piece together. And
I don't even think there's it's about them piecing together. I feel like it is in that disconnection that she's trying to make a point. But to me, it's also a film that there's no. I don't feel like there's like a a right answer to think about it. There's a scene in which she's talking to a filmmaker about how she feels that acting is sort of fake, that or that using non-actors, it's sort of like exploitative, or that you're sort of like extracting reality from them when performances are fake,
falsity,
and and like mixing actors with non-actors is also terrible, because you're sort of not having reality or fiction. And it's a very engaged conversation that she has mostly with herself.
Yeah, it's like he just kind of says, okay.
The filmmaker just listens to her ramble about her ideas of this. And to me, that talks about how she's known real tragedy and she's known real pain, and she's we see in scenes that she's trying to grapple with that, and like not doesn't want to engage with the kids. It's also not a mother that's like trying to be comforting or not. She's like struggling in her own. And perhaps when you've gone through something like that and you see tragedy perform or in fiction, maybe you sort of lose or you feel it, she finds it offensive. I don't know. So I feel like there's a lot of layers to uncover here, the metaphor with the animals, and then there's moments of like strange humor, like when she has this conflict with a man who uses a device to talk, but that's trying from whom she buys a bike. I apologize for not knowing the name of this. The electronic thing that helps
the hole in your neck. Yeah.
I apologize, I don't know the specific name of it. And so I feel like it's a film built of moments that are interesting on their own, and that I feel like people could sort of mine different meanings from them, but it doesn't give you a point A to point B and sort of like a beginning, middle, and end in a traditional sense. And I think that's what makes it interesting. So this one is a challenging one for those who don't expect the film to sort of like give you a narrative story in the traditional sense.
But we'll let you know when it comes to either back to theaters or goes to VOD.
Yeah, the Cinema Guild is the distributor, so hopefully, I'm sure they still do physical releases, and I'm sure they'll do a VOD, so you'll have a chance to see it.
And then finally, Wendy, which we've already talked about before on the Sundance episode. But
it's a big film, even for its standards. I feel like it's a big film.
So this one did play in theaters, but you might have missed it because maybe you're going to wait a little longer and you forgot about it.
It opened in LA and New York in late February, and it was it was going to span as weeks went on. I don't know how far that went, but it did. It did play, and it didn't get the best reviews.
Yeah, I think. It's one of those cases where a lot of people who didn't like Beasts of the Wild really didn't like this one either, but also people who liked Beasts of the Wild seemingly also didn't come to support it.
It was a strange case because it wasn't just that people didn't like it. Some people actively
really
hated it. This film, which I was at the premiere at Sundance, which is a very programmer film critic thing to say. When I saw it at Sundance, and I always make this joke because
third row from the front.
I always find it so funny how people tend to have to let you know what festival
it's very important
they saw this film at, because they clearly need to let you know that they saw it before you, and so but the important thing about the fact that I was at the premiere is not that I get to see it before you, is that, the reaction was so instantly negative, like the moment we stepped out, and I find myself in the very, very slim minority of people that write about film that like this movie. There's a couple of others out
But
there.
it is just, it's one of those cases where it's so shocking that, 10 years later, obviously 10 years is a long time, but the applause and the acclaim was so big, and the box up was so big, Beast in the Wild, and 10 years later, there is just the exact opposite. There's a lot more negativity and a lot less box office.
It might be, it's a different world. You know, it might, perhaps the reservations that people have now with Wendy or with any story that features maybe the South or African American characters or that region of the country is different to what it was 10 years ago. And he did wait very long because it took him all these years to make this movie. I interviewed him for Movie Maker magazine, and he talked about the sort of long process of making this movie, that it wasn't that he wasn't working, it's just that he was working on this thing because it's so elaborate and so complicated, and that's the way that he likes to work. Whether that played against the film, maybe, and there's another thing of I don't understand what the expectation was. Was he expected to do something entirely different? A lot of people complain that it is the same film or that it's too similar to Beast of the Southern Wild. I agree that there's definitely, the musical component is, very sort of ravishing music, and it's the same composers.
It's great music.
He's working with with the exception of the cinematographer, I think he's working with mostly the exact same sort of like crew, which is like the people that he's is close to and works with. So the product, was gonna sort of be similar, especially because he's also dealing with this magical sort of,
once again, children, how they deal with magical realism, and he filters Peter Pan through kind of once again the Southern angle. He has his own take on it.
Yeah, it's a very sultry sort of like muddy, kind of like gritty sort of like look to this fairy tale that makes it feel grounded and more real, and that's what he likes.
There have been so many times Peter Pan's been about, leotards and flying and sword fights, and this is not that.
I honestly, I haven't, look closely at the reviews that are, incredibly negative towards it. I haven't read them in full, so I don't know exactly what it is that people find so negative about it. But personally, I enjoyed it. I think, it was, moving, and there's beautiful imagery in it. The cinematography is wonderful. The performances of the children are really great. I mean, it spoke to me, and I liked it. I don't think it's a masterpiece or whatnot, but I did enjoy it, and I am fascinated by the way that he works in terms of like using actual puppets or creatures, and shooting in real locations and all that. That's something that personally interests me. And I feel like, the music is wonderful, and there's some beautiful moments. It's one of those that some people are gonna really, some people clearly hate it, but then you have someone like Sean Baker, who saw it and really enjoyed it. So, it's definitely a divisive film.
But we'll hopefully Searchlight will either re-release it later this year, or definitely at least come to VOD.
Yeah, I don't know if this is gonna be a re-release. I feel like this might be just going to VOD and Blu-ray or DVD. Because it did have almost a month in theaters.
It's that weird place where it did have a release, a full several weeks, almost a month, but then like it really isn't enough to justify bringing it back. So yeah,
I do feel like by the time I don't know how long that is. When things settle and people can go back to the movies, might be too late for them to bring it back, or to justify bringing it back. So I feel like VOD might be the best way for people to see this.
All right, well, now before we get into the virtual cinema, we also have the streaming sites. We have a film that's straight to Netflix, as Netflix often does. We have The Platform, which you reviewed for the LA Times,
which I feel like this one is one of those that, I mean, there's plenty of movies that go straight to Netflix. A lot of international films that never get any reviews or coverage. Like, no one really knows that they're there. They just appear, and films that play festivals.
Also Crip Camp now, the documentary from Sundance, is now
right, but
on
that's
Netflix.
a big title.
That's a big title.
That's a big title. What I'm talking about are
sure.
International films like System Crasher, A Land Imagine, all these titles that play, major film festivals that were also the country's Oscar submission for best international film last year, and they just appear there without anyone sort of reviewing them or knowing that they're there. On the contrary, this one has become, I think it was, I just checking a thing, they posted that it was number one in the US. It sort of reached
the new top 10 feature on Netflix. Yeah,
right. Number one on Netflix, as I meant. And it's, it's a film that it's timely. It's about class, and it's
a genre film, which helps, I think.
Right. But but I think that what makes it relevant is the topical sort of element of it, and the concept, and because it's a film from Spain, and the fact that people are home, it's really,
it's a film about being trapped in a small space.
It really found, for better or worse, like the perfect moment to be released, and and I feel like that's really helped it. I think it's a great film. I don't know if it would have had the same sort of reaction if it had come out at a different point in time, but it's really doing well on the platform, and
because the film,
and I've seen a lot of critics that rarely write about international films on Netflix writing about it, so they clearly have been pushing this.
Yeah, because this is the film where it's sort of a science fiction horror film about this sort of prison sort of situation where everyone lives, two people at a time live on a platform in this gigantic column, one on top of the other, and every day food comes down from the top to the bottom, and every floor people pick away the food, so by it gets to the bottom there's no food left.
Right, only the ones the higher you are, the better chance you have of getting food. In every month you change, you wake up in a different level, so sort of one month you could be on
number
level
7,
and have access to more food, and then you'll be number 50, and then you'll have to sort of like fight to get food, or
pick at the bones,
find other ways to get food, resort to cannibalism or horrible things. So it's a very gruesome, grotesque sort of film, very not in a bad way, because it is purposeful.
But it's a film that does not shy away from like the horrors of what the situation would entail.
Right, and it is sort of like a very clear, I don't want to say obvious, but a very clear allegory to wealth doesn't trickle down. It's just those at the top. Once you're at the top, no matter if you were at the bottom.
Exactly.
Once you're at the top, you become an oppressor.
I like that it doesn't imply, just because you're at the bottom, you are a more noble person. No, if you get to the top, you would be just the same, unfortunately.
Right, because now you have access to more food, so you wanna hoard the food, because in this situation you don't know when you'll be when you'll be down there.
Just like self-quarantine, everyone's hoarding toilet paper right now. You don't know when you're gonna run out or when you'll need it.
Yeah, and it's sort of. Yeah, I think it's a fascinating and powerful concept that works because it is, in a sense, obvious. It is. It's a vertical. It's like there's levels, and there's the wealth, which is represented by the food in this case, coming down, and the lower you are, the less you get, and you become desperate, and sort of like the ones at the bottom are the ones that are killing themselves, killing each other. So. Yeah, there's other layers within the fact that you could have one item, you could bring one item with you, and the fact that some people are there paying, like some people are convicted and given the choice of serving their sentence. There are other people that
chose to be there
in because of a promise, a reward.
Yeah.
So. It's fascinating, and one of the writers, Pedro Rivero, it's two writers, and one of them is the creator of Bird Boy, The Forgotten Children, a very dystopian.
Which makes perfect sense when you see the film.
Right. So totally, dystopian animated feature that gets released a couple years back that you should check out if you enjoy the platform. You should watch Bird Boy for sure.
Yeah, so that's on Netflix. But now let's go into the films that are available. You can now you can rent via virtual cinema, and the best way to do this is to go to your local cinema and you go through their website. It'll take you to a link. How every theater has
your
their own
local
links.
Independent film. If theater.
So first one, St. Francis from Psilocybin Laboratories, directed by Alex Thompson and starring Kelly O'Sullivan, who also wrote the screenplay. And this was a winner at last year's South by, big hit there, and now it comes out via Oscilloscope. And this is a really interesting comedy about a 34-year-old woman who feels she's not going anywhere in life. She doesn't have a big job. She's not married. She feels like she's kind of a fuck up, and she gets a job as a babysitter for this very precocious, I don't know, is it 4 or 5-year-old during the summer vacation, and it kind of becomes this sort of buddy comedy between this 34-year-old woman who feels like she doesn't have direction and this child who's always very opinionated and very driven, and how they interact, become unlikely friends.
Right, and he's also, the kid is, it's the child of a interracial lesbian couple, and that plays a part in sort of like how the dynamic at home works, and interactions with the outside world. What does that represent? And perhaps that also, not perhaps, that clearly has to do in how sort of like ahead of her age the young girl is, because she's sort of like grown up in a household that has had to perhaps teach her that the outside world is not accepting often of their family. So I think it's a very layer and interesting way to approach a story about this woman becoming friends with this young girl that could feel in other circumstances more corny or cheesy.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. There's a studio comedy version of this film,
right,
which is very silly and slapstick.
There's all these movies,
like Baby Mama or something like that. Like there are films about these kind of topics.
No. I'm thinking about like Kindergarten Cop, or
sure.
What was the one that was about to come out on? Or I don't know.
Oh, the My Spy. You're right. Yeah, about And usually in Hollywood, it's a big burly tough guy and a small kid. You're right. Yeah.
There's a lot of those movies. Or even something like the one with John Leguizamo and John Cena, the one that were they're firefighters.
They got a plane with fire. Yeah.
Yeah, which is about like this big man, befriending, and having like shenanigans with like young kids, and how they usually learn a lesson from the child, which it's the case here,
sure.
But done in a way that this woman is not, she's not a firefighter. She's not career driven. She's also struggling with all this uncertainty and not knowing.
The film also deals with abortion. You're right. It deals with interracial lesbian couple. A lot of interesting nuances that brings in. It brings in like there's a little bit of there's that. She comes from not a wealthy family, but she's from a she's from a middle class, well off family. Mm-hmm. So, but there's also a little bit of class, like when she meets like neighbors or a former classmate who's doing better than she is objectively with like money, and how she views her differently now.
She's at that age, like I find myself at, which like a lot of my friends from high school, have children now,
sure.
And they've sort of like settled into that life. Some of them are doing, great financially. Some are not, and it's sort of like it's inevitable that you compare yourself to people that are at the same stage in life, right? That you compare yourself to like, this idea of like, oh my God, all my friends are getting married, all my friends are getting kids, and I'm sort of left behind. And she doesn't want that, but the societal expectation is always, even as much as you don't want to, partake in what society expects of you, there's always a little bit of that, because the mother's also telling her, there's this conversation in the film about how having children, even in a terrible world, is sort of like an act of fate or like hope, that you're bringing new people into this world, hoping that it's better or whatnot. So I feel like the interesting part to me is that she's not a character that's, that's great. That there's nothing particularly impressive or unique about her. She's just a 30-something-year-old woman who doesn't know what to do with her life, who has talents, and, it's a good person, but it's not.
There's no stuff about how she's like writing a screenplay, or she's like this close to getting her master's degree. Like, no, it's about her dealing with personal issues, not about she's one step closer to being a perfect person. Like, that's not the arc of the movie. The arc of the movie is her bonding with.
Yeah, it's not an aspirational sort of movie in the sense that it's not about her overcoming these big challenges. It's just more about her sort of like coming to terms with, what her life is and how there's value in that, and how she should be okay with that, whether that means not having children or not finding a partner, because there's also this kind of like goofy guy that she's seeing that's sort of like more driven towards that life of like having a family or whatnot. It's I definitely enjoyed this one. Mm-hmm. It was unexpectedly charming.
Yeah, so that one is now available online. Next we have
Bacurau, which I
Bacurau.
feel like we talked about in the last episode.
Did we?
I have memories of that. Maybe we didn't. I don't know. It's day 15 of this for me. We could have talked about this enough, but just briefly, this is a Brazilian film directed by Clever Mendoza Filho and Juliano Dornelles. Co-directors. Funny enough, Clever has done features before. Never in Sounds. Aquarius is one of the most sort of prominent and political, politically outspoken filmmakers in Brazil, which has gotten earned him sort of retribution from Brazil's conservative government right now. Juliano, the co-director and co-writer in this one, used to be his production designer in his other features, which is an interesting sort of jump from being the production designer to becoming a writer co-director in this genre, a spaghetti western sort of film.
Sure, John Carpenter.
Right, but set in Brazil, in a sort of dystopian also version of Brazil in which the government has hired these Americans to erase from the map literally an entire town, but the town that they've chosen to get rid of is fighting back.
Fights back, yeah.
And
it's a classic, it's a cowboy theme. It's a small town being invaded, and they're gonna fight back.
Save the farm kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the stakes are high. The reason why I think or thought that we talked about this is because there's a scene in which a scene that I love and that I felt like I've talked about a lot is in which the Americans were these mercenaries and killers hired to erase this town, have a conversation with a Brazilian couple who are basically working on their side, and this Brazilian couple, as many of you may know, there's a big sort of issue with class and race in Latin America that they're usually tied, in the fact that the more lighter skinned European looking folks in Latin America tend to be those in power, tend to be the ones with the money, the wealthy class, as opposed to the more indigenous or Afro Latinos that tend to be the lower working class struggling, and suffering from the social injustices that this system creates. So this Brazilian couple, they're from the wealthier sphere, they're light skinned, they claim to have European ancestry, and because they have European ancestry and because they're wealthier and educated, they feel like they are equals to the Americans, that they're sort of like more American or more European, that they're Latin American or Brazilian, but that sort of gets shut down. They sort of realize that the idea of sort of race or ethnicity or culture goes beyond just the color of the skin or wealth. Is this concept of you could be wealthy and white, but you'll never be American, you'll never be European, you're still Brazilian, you're still lesser, less than, and I'm explaining to you in the way that's more, philosophical. It happens in a much more gruesome and brutal way in this scene, as the film is, sort of violent and gritty as you would expect. Spaghetti western sort of a genre type of film. Sonia Braga is in it. the great iconic Brazilian actress,
and she faces off against Udo Kier, the great
German
actor
who lives in Palm Springs. Who we've seen. I mean, at least I've seen him a bunch of times at the Palm Springs International Film Festival. He's like a fixture in Palm Springs arts culture. He has a house there and he's very prominent and goes to the festival and to the parties. So
but I love that he goes then to Brazil, makes this film.
I do wonder. It is. I am very curious because I was there. I mean, I've gone to the Palm Springs Film Festival, for several years now. I think it was maybe 2-3 years when Aquarius, the year after Aquarius premiered Cannes, when he was sort of like still doing festivals and he played there. Or for some reason, the director Clever Mendoza Filho was there, and I talked to Clever, and also Udo was there. I wonder if they probably met in Palm Springs, and that's how it happened. Maybe Clever can confirm or deny this in an interview, or maybe he has. I just don't know. But I do find it interesting that he was there and that Udo is such a fixture there. So I wonder if maybe the Palm Springs Film Festival
had the screenplay. Hey Udo, read this.
The Palm Springs Film Festival can claim some, sort of bringing those two artists
Maybe
together.
they're in the special thanks at the end of the credits.
Maybe, who knows?
But yeah, it's a really fun movie because I think it's great. It is very political and very socially conscious, but also just really entertaining too. It's also there's gunfire, there's fight scenes, it's a drama. It's about the people of this town, all the nuances and unique characters there.
Right.
So it's all these things wrapped up in one.
Of course, to me, what makes it more interesting is the sort of political, social element. Because otherwise, it'll be, entertaining, but it wouldn't. It would lack that sort of extra element
that makes it unique and makes it better.
Right. Not that old genre films have to have a message or sort of interesting political social undertones, but coming from these filmmakers, it feels right to use this medium, to use this genre as a vehicle for bigger ideas, particularly with what's happening in Brazil.
Sure.
And in the world in general, but in Brazil, even more so than in other places.
And that's why this film won an award at Cannes, because they recognize that.
And it became like a hit in Brazil.
That's great.
Which is great for him, whose films have always been sort of like more on the art house side.
And next we have Zombie Child from Film Movement, the new film from Bertrand Bonello. We liked his film Nocturama a few years ago, and this definitely feels, in the same vein. It's him taking sort of a genre that was kind of about, terrorism and
almost like a heist
film.
Yeah.
And this is a sort of supernatural, like almost like an art house version of The Craft. It's about a all-girls French boarding school, and the new girl who is a Haitian, and the girls are curious about, and it becomes about voodoo, about how she's from Haiti, she knows the voodoo culture, her aunt practices voodoo.
It's a mambo.
And how these white French girls become very interested in voodoo and want to learn more about it. And the story is contrasted with this separate storyline about a man in the 1960s in Haiti who is zombified, and that's actually based on a real event of a man who claimed to have been turned into a zombie and was forced to be a slave, basically working on plantations in Haiti.
Yeah, I mean, the third act is crazy, and it becomes sort of like this very weird and
it pays off. The voodoo pays off.
But what I find more interesting in this one again is sort of like the connections that are made between things, at least in the way that I perceive them, that this Haitian girl who moved to France after the earthquake it was 2011, 2010.
Yeah.
That killed an incredible amount of people in Haiti and destroyed the country almost entirely. It was such a terrible event. And she moved to France, was able to move to France and to enter this elite school because her mother had been recognized with this special honor that the French...
Legionnaires, the Legion of France award.
Yeah, that, they give to people for doing something important, in France or in other countries or whatnot.
In service of the French country.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's, well, not yes and no, but this is my point being that she's allowed to, to be part of this elite school. As far as we can tell, she's the only black girl in this group. And they're always questioning her, asking her, how you here? Who in your family has this honor that allows you to be here, right? And to me, there's a lot of things about colonialism in this plot. There's things about how, the zombification, is sort of like a mindless being that's just going through the motions and not asking questions. And to an extent, this school and this particular school is about that. It's about how Napoleon founded the school and how, you're in essence a zombie of the state.
Sure.
They're indoctrinating you, they're teaching you these things. To me, that's another sort of zombification. The idea of like you have to conform with them. There's when the I don't know what they call it, the principal walks in, they have this very weird
the move they do, like the salute is it's like a backwards bow. It's very interesting.
And things like that to me speak of like it's sort of like they're indoctrinating these people into like there's a moment when the teacher thinks about like, oh, we don't want, no, I think that the principal or the superintendent, whatever, she tells them about, we don't want you to think about things just to sort of follow. That Napoleon wanted people to just follow, not be rational, not think about these things.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of subtext in those things, but there's also about how she is from Haiti, which is the poorest country in the Americas, right? Which was a French colony, and how now she's going to France, to sort of like, I don't want to say reconquer, but sort of like she's going to a school that was founded by one of the France's biggest sort of like
Dictators,
dictators and
Yeah.
colonizers and whatnot. So the idea that there's all these subtext about colonization and even sort of like taking over culture, these white girls trying to learn about voodoo and like use voodoo for personal gain or for their personal sort of plans. It's sort of like,
And, like,
appropriating that
And they try to
culture.
explain to her like, no, voodoo's about it's a religion. It's about connecting with your people and understanding culture. No, I need it to solve my one problem. Like, that's not what it's for. You shouldn't be trying to.
And also the
use it for that.
fact that she's she's ashamed of listening to her music because they think that she's weird.
You're right.
They never talk about it explicitly, but there's all these subtexts about colonialism and how she's the one Asian girl there, and how the mother won that honor by fighting dictators back at home, but Haiti in a lot of colonies have suffered so much because they were colonies, because they were Haiti was populated by slaves that the French took from Africa. It's like she gives this speech about the how the spirits of the people that were taken,
and that's what zombieism really, unfortunately, in this one I was looking into it more because of this, but zombie legend is intrinsically tied to slavery,
right,
in the colonies, and it's about, that's where it comes. That's where the real heart of zombies is about. It's about the metaphor for being enslaved. So that the fact that even now that word has been colonized and become, it's just this fantasy about killing people because they're zombies. That's also a part of appropriation and colonization, just using it for that. And I'm glad this film is trying to re-enter that and re-center it around slavery and colonization.
Yeah, and I feel like Bonello has made films about confronting France, as a French filmmaker, as a white French filmmaker, confronting that. There's a moment in the film in which the main white girl is like, my pain doesn't matter because I'm white and healthy, and it's sort of like doesn't understand the idea of like how the people are suffering, or how they're throwing away food, and how a lot of people in Haiti, again, is a very poor country. So all these subjects I find interesting, but also something like Nocturama, which is a film about these young people going against France, and sort of like trying to tear down, literally burning monuments, and going against this idea of France in a pedestal, of like, I think the Zombie Child begins with like how France is synonym with revolution, but also revolution only when it's convenient and when it's about the gain of the establishment, and Nocturama is the opposite, about this very radical, also zombies, because I think like in Nocturama they're like used by someone else for they're put there, and then they're allowed to fall and take the fall when the police comes. I'm sorry if you haven't seen Nocturama, but it's been out for a couple of years.
Yeah,
so
but you're right. He's very
critical, critical of his of a country that puts itself in a pedestal, like all countries, like the United States put itself in a pedestal, and filmmakers are I think it's important that there are filmmakers that question that through their stories question that. So I found this one fascinating and much more interesting that could seem on the surface.
And that definitely, that third act is crazy.
Yeah.
So these are the ones we've seen. They're all available now. You can check out your local theaters, check the websites for Kino, Oscilloscope, and Film Movement. Also, Music Box Films is starting their own one as well. They're releasing And Then We Danced via their own virtual cinema. So if you haven't seen that, we reviewed it last episode, but really terrific gay romance, really interesting.
In Georgia.
Some other films that are available now are Sorry We Missed You, the new film from Ken Loach. It was at Cannes, I believe, as well.
Corpus Christi, which was an Oscar nominee from Poland, about this fake priest.
The Wild Goose Lake, which is a Chinese thriller that was at Cannes last year. And also Film Movement has two of their kind of restored films they're also releasing. La Inocente.
And Doña Flora and her two husbands with Sonia Braga, which you could do a double feature with.
I think that's why they had it. Yeah, exactly. But La Inocente is the Visconti film, so those are also available. And Netflix has Crip Camp, and Amazon Prime has Blow the Man Down. So there are films available that if you really want to find new films that are out there that unfortunately if you can't go out, these are available to you. But we just encourage you, think of the theaters and think of so try and support them any way you can. That's why I'm really happy that at least this way you'll get some money to those theaters. But
Right.
you know, there in New York, you've got Film and Lincoln Center, Film Forum, BAM Rose Cinemas. Here in LA, you've got the Frida Cinema and the Lamley Cinemas. San Diego has Digital Gym. Chicago has the Music Box and the Gene Siskel. Minneapolis has the Minneapolis Film Society, the Denver Film Society, and the Austin Film Society. And there are many more out there that are also doing this. So we're happy that there's an option for them. And we hope this isn't forever, though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good way for now,
Yeah.
for things as things are now, and hopefully people will discover these theaters, the distributors, and hope support them in real life when things get better.
Yeah.
Whenever that is.
That's all we have this episode of our virtual cinema 1 week only. As always, find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Give us a like or share or retweet, and find more episodes on iTunes and SoundCloud. But until next time, I'm Connor.
This is Carlos.
Thank you for listening.